presenting or writing about gardening, this is where I spend most of my time and where I've been honing my horticultural skills for 40 years. Whether you've got a spacious plot, a tiny patio or a few window boxes, there's nothing more exciting and satisfying than creating your own garden. From basic to more advanced techniques, I believe anyone can learn how to do it. Whether you're a complete novice or an experienced gardener, I want to help you develop the skills to make your garden grow. I'm ready. Are you? Hello and welcome back to my garden. Spring is really revving up now. Everywhere you look there are signs galore. On some of the trees there are catkins beginning to drape the branches, and even some of the leaf buds are beginning to unfurl. But it's at ground level that the real show is starting. There are primroses on all the banks, celandines peeping out here and there, opening up their golden flowers. It's glorious, but there's one plant in particular which to me always means that spring is here. I'm talking about trilliums. It's intriguing, beautiful and very, very special. This particular one is called Trillium chloropetalum. It's one of my favourite plants in the garden, and yet it almost looks a bit dangerous. It looks reptilian. It's like snake skin, and everything about it, hence its name Trillium, is in threes. So you get three of these beautiful big bracts here, three of these sort of side petals, three upright petals that rear up almost sort of snake-like, are in threes. And if you glimpse inside, if you dare, everything there is in threes too. They love these sort of conditions. So the shade of deciduous trees in the summer, but in the spring, plenty of warmth and sunshine. That's what brings them shooting through. Later on, these flowers will change into big spherical seed pods. And it's at that stage that I usually try and come and collect them. But very often I've missed the boat because the snails and the slugs have got in there first. But we've got something to thank those molluscs for, because they spread the seed throughout the bed. And I've only planted a few of these here deliberately. The rest have been spread by them. Thank you very much, snails and slugs. In spring, it's not just bold plants like the trilliums that grab our attention. Sometimes it's the beautiful details of some of the tiniest flowers that make this season truly what it is. And none more so, I think, than these plants. These are hepaticas. They're very, very special plants, and yet too seldom grown, because they're actually really simple and straightforward. Whichever part of the world they come from, they usually grow in the same sort of conditions, often on slopes where drainage is really good, and very frequently under deciduous trees. So in the spring they get loads of light, and then when the canopy fills in overhead, they're plunged into shade. And they come through at a time that gives them their common name, breaking snow plants. That's when you first see, as the snow melts, these beautiful little shoots coming through. I've planted quite a few here, but I'm really greedy because I want to put a few more in. I love this one, Hepatica nobilis. This just shows you the kind of variety that you can get in these leaves. Many of them are marbled, and the foliage is almost as beautiful as these perfect flowers. Just look at that. They really are exquisite. My mum's beautiful cercis tree provides an ideal setting for these plants. Well, there's no sign of snow here, but this is the perfect place for these hepaticas. Although I've got heavy clay soil, I've added lots and lots of leaf mould to it to improve the drainage, because that's what these plants need. Leaf mould is just all my old rotted down leaves that have been standing for over a year down at the bottom of the garden. So I can just go ahead and simply make a hole. Quite a lot bigger than the size of the pot. Always important whatever you're planting, but particularly here I want these roots, very fine roots, to move quite quickly through this soil so the plant becomes established. And of course, during the summer and next winter I'll forget all about them, and then one day next spring we'll walk down this path and there they'll be smiling up at me, just enjoying life and helping me enjoy mine to the full. Now, if you've not got a garden or you've got very limited space, there's absolutely no reason why you can't enjoy hepaticas, providing you give them just the right sort of conditions, which you can do equally well in a container as you can in the garden. It's got some holes in the peepo in the bottom, and I'm going to put some drainage material in the bottom, just crocks, broken bits of plant pots. I'm going to use some of this gorgeous compost. Now it's scrumptious. It's some of my usual compost, which consists of sterilised loam, a bit of multi-purpose, some extra grit, and to it I've added generous amounts of leaf mould, because I want these little plants to feel completely at home and to give these the same sort of woodlandy soil. What they don't want is a real baking in the sun. They won't cope with that. They get nothing like that where they come from, because they've evolved with their habitat. The two evolve together. You want your mix to be nice and open, never compacted, because plants need, as well as moisture and compost, they also need air. That's it. Hello, Fifi. Have you come to see how I'm getting on? I think I'm going to try and find one of those little children's watering cans to water this, because I must be careful not to wash the soil away, not to drench them, to try and maintain this kind of slightly mounded effect. Small is most definitely beautiful. Next, I'll be indulging in the delights of another favourite tiny spring jewel. Bright as stars are all these gorgeous celandines with their brilliant yellow flowers. There is a flower, the lesser celandine, that shrinks like many more from cold and rain, and the first moment that the sun may shine, bright as the sun himself, 'tis out again. So wrote the poet William Wordsworth of the humble celandine, his favourite spring flower. How lovely that he appreciated this simple little flower so well. It's beautiful. Celandines are a native British plant. At this time of year, brightening up wild places such as hedgerows and the banks of streams. The steep Devon bank is just marbled all the way along with these beautiful green leaves, and then these two yellows are pale, pale primroses, and spangled in between them, bright as stars, are all these gorgeous celandines with their brilliant yellow flowers. It just shows you how these plants grow. They spread by seed, they split spontaneously at their roots and tumble down the banks, and the more you look, the more you see how distinctly different all this foliage is. How one plant can have so many different kind of variations, and yet all these are just our wild, straightforward celandine. They're wildflowers, but they also frequently crop up in our gardens, and there are plenty of them in mine. Some people don't tolerate them in the gardens. They find them an absolute thumping nuisance. On the other hand, me and quite a lot of other people too absolutely love them. In fact, I love them so much I want more of them, including some lovely cultivated varieties. Look at this, it's Randall's white. The back of the petals is almost bluish, but then it's these creamy white, very, very shiny petals and this lovely middle. But very often they'll put themselves into places you don't want them. In front of my sorrel, my favourite salad herb, there's a big clump of brazen hussy, so utterly beautiful with this bronze foliage. How could you not like that? Well, the main reason some people aren't keen is because they can spread really prolifically. The root system is composed of all these tiny little tubers, and the thing is that every one of these will make a fresh plant, which is why some gardeners consider it a nuisance. Often, when you're actually trying to weed it out, that's when you do the damage, and instead of getting rid of it, you spread it and help it on its way. But what happens if you want to plant celandines in your garden, but you don't want them to spread themselves everywhere? Well, there's a really simple way of doing it. So what I'm going to do is just use these little clay pots. By putting these new celandines in pots before planting them in the ground, I can control their spreading habit while still allowing them to thrive. So a little bit of crock in the bottom of the pot there, just to cover that hole. Tiny bit of compost in the bottom, and I'm going to sink these into the ground. Because these plant pots are porous, excess water will go out of them, but they'll stay reasonably moist and damp and should carry on growing really well. Just give that a little firm in. And then what I'm going to do is find a suitable spot, dig a hole, sink this in, making sure that the rim of the pot is just under the surface of the soil. That's really important, because if it's sitting proud of the soil, then it can dry out quite easily. So I think that's deep enough. Yes, excavation complete. And hopefully it's going to look like it's always been growing there. I think it's very easy to understand why Wordsworth had such fondness for this delightful little flower. With the celandines taken care of, my next thought is for my pond. It's surrounded by a boggy area that's ripe for a spring renovation. It's a wonderful place for attracting all sorts of different wildlife, things that perhaps wouldn't visit other parts of the garden. Dragonflies galore, but around the edge, you see signs of spring just beginning to happen. You perhaps recognise this lovely plant. It's Caltha palustris, otherwise known as the marsh marigold. You see it beside streams and rivers in boggy places. We always used to call it kingcups, because that's what the flowers are like, these great big golden chalices. And they've got very, very shiny petals, which immediately gives you a clue to what its relations are. It's very closely related to celandines. It belongs to Ranunculaceae, the buttercup family. And it's a glorious, glowing plant. It really welcomes in the season. Be out soon too. It's the area beyond the pond that I'm working on today. Although it's supposed to be a bug garden, I've never really made a wholehearted effort with it. So today's the day. What do I mean by a bug garden? Well, it's just an area that's not running water or a pond, but the soil is moist and it stays moist all the time. And what it means is that you can grow a whole range of plants that wouldn't grow anywhere else at all. It's absolutely love these kind of conditions. I'm just lightening this up a bit and adding a little bit of old compost that's been rescued from plants that didn't make it. And nothing goes to waste in this garden, but it will give those plants an opportunity to move into something a bit easier until they get established. And I've got just the plant to create an exciting framework to my bog garden. My beautiful iris Pseudochorus variegata, which I recently dug up and divided. This is the variegated one, and I'll plant it too as a marginal. A marginal is just a plant that grows beside water. And this is such an adaptable plant, providing you don't try and grow it in a thin, dry soil. This is not planting with any sort of finesse, in with the boot. I love the sword-like leaves of this iris. Strong verticals, but beside it I'd love to have trolleus. It's a globe flower and it's called New Moon. A buttercup, but a real beauty. It won't run, it'll just make a handsome big clump of these shiny leaves covered with these gorgeous sort of creamy flowers. I just want a hole that's a little bit bigger than this root ball. When this plant grows up, it should be endowed with several flowers, but when it's established, you'll get lots and lots of them, but all in the spring. Nestle it in, bring back this soil plus compost. If you give it a tug and it's not going to come out, you're pretty sure it's all right. Although it's lovely to anticipate what's going to happen in here, a bit of instant gratification is also nice. So I'm going to plant these little Primula denticulatas in here. This is a beautiful Asiatic Primula which has become part and parcel really of British horticulture. Lots of people grow it, it's very straightforward, but it does love this kind of place. So I think we'll just bob them in quite close to the trolleus. If you haven't got the natural conditions to grow bog plants, there's a way round it, and it's a bit like starting a small pond. First, I'm going to recycle an empty compost bag to help create the consistently damp conditions that my bog plants will need. I'm actually going to use it to line a pit about that or so. I'm going to take out all the soil, mix it with some good stuff and line that hole with it. I mean, you don't really want to just put this absolutely anywhere. Give it a bit of thought about where you site it. So, you know, at the edge of a border, or just in a little bit, where you've got similar plants. Having dug out the soil, I'm going to mix it up with a bit of really good loamy compost with the addition of lots of leaf mould too, which will retain the moisture. What I don't want though is for these plants when they go in to be sitting in stagnant water, because even a bog plant doesn't like that. It likes the water eventually to drain through. So I'm just going to use this and make a whole load of holes in the bottom. And that'll just provide the amount of drainage that these plants need. Even in quite a small garden, you can have a range of different sorts of habitats, different plants for different places. And you'll get different sorts of wildlife too, but you just try and create as much diversity as you can, which means, in turn, you'll get just as much diversity back. So that's going in first. This is what you call heavy soil. And then some of my mixture on the top. You'll never know there's a plastic bag hidden under there, but the plants within it are going to thrive. I've chosen some really beautiful plants for this new little downsized bog area. I'm going to start off with a trolleus. Get it in nice intimate contact with all that soil around it. When we've finished planting, and we've trimmed all the plastic at the side, we'll give it a thorough watering, and that should keep it damp indefinitely really. Just occasionally give it a bit of extra water if it gets very, very dry. And I've got here this beautiful fritillary. It's called the snake's head fritillary because as these buds emerge, it really does look, the whole thing looks serpentine. And of course that lizardy effect on the back of the bells also makes it look even more snake-like. It's a plant of damp meadows. It's a native plant, and it used to be very common until people started draining the land everywhere. Right, now this is a bog primula. It's Primula bulliana, and it looks like nothing at all at the moment, just lots and lots of little shoots just coming through the ground, just emerging. But if you turn this pot out, it is full of really lovely big thick roots, and this is going to establish brilliantly well. It's a Chinese primula, and it's part of the candelabra group, so you'll get these whorls of flowers growing right up the stem. Might add a few other things later, but that's going to give me a really lovely little display in this bit. So if you'd like to make your own boggy plant paradise, dig a hole at least 6 inches deep. Lay an old compost bag punctured with holes and fill it with some of the soil you took out, enriched with leaf mould and compost. Next, what all roses need is a bit of judicious pruning. How to become a professional rose pruner. I've just come in to check up on these auriculas, Primula auriculas to give them their full title. Last year I took a few little offsets, pulled them off the side with their roots and potted them up, and they've made brilliant little plants. They're only babies, but they're coming along so well. But what I'm really interested in right now is propagating something of a different kind, something edible. Got room for one more? Thank you. I could spend all day just stroking the dog, but better get on with some things. This is my favourite lettuce, it's Little Gem, but I've let these get a little bit big. So I'm going to give this a smart tap, and that should separate. Look at that, you can really see those roots. So first of all, just in that tiny sort of pinch, there are 4 little plants. And ideally, when you're pricking out, you should take hold of the seed leaves. Those are the first 2 leaves that most plants make. So I'm using these seed leaves just to separate the plants, pull them apart. And each one's got a really good little root system. Let's just lower this down very gently to this space. Press it in a bit. So I'm pricking these out into our standard potting mixture, which has got some loam in it, it's got some multi-purpose and a bit of extra grit. They were sown though into seed compost. Now that root's a bit long, but if I just nip it off like that, won't hurt the plant, will help it send out more roots actually. I'll give them and the module tray a really thorough watering and then put them back in the greenhouse. And within a few weeks, these will have grown to a size where they've made a proper root system. When they're rooted really well, I'm going to put them into pots. And I actually harvest them like that too. It's a really good idea to just keep on sowing them every few weeks. Then you ensure that you've got lots and lots of fresh leaves I'll tell you what, I'm going to be inundated with salad, aren't I? This one's lost its root. So glorious. I've actually abandoned my coat because I want to do a bit of seed sowing. Tomatoes are one of the most widely grown crops. People love them. The variety I'm going to grow is called San Marzano 2. It's a plum tomato and it's supposed to have superb flavour. In here, probably enough for half of Devon actually. Loads of them. And because I can see this seed, it's quite big, I can station sow it. In other words, I can actually drop that seed in, so each seed is separate. So I just want to put a fine layer of grit over the top of them. I don't sprinkle compost on them at all because they need the light. And although this looks dense, light actually gets through there. Now, this is a superb tomato for cooking, but what if I want to grow something that's just for eating, straight off the vine, you know, that lovely feeling. So my mum used to grow Gardener's Delight and Sun Gold in grow bags by her back window, and they were utterly, utterly delicious. I can just taste them now. So I'm going to grow some of those as well. I shall probably keep mine in under cover right the way through the season, but you can bring them outside and plant them out as soon as the frost is definitely past, and then they get a really good long growing season. That's it. I'm going to water these by actually standing the tray in some shallow water until I can see that the grit on the top is damp, and then I'll stand it up on the greenhouse bench in the warmest, brightest place I've got. Not only do you know exactly how they've been grown, they haven't been stored for ages, they haven't taken all sorts of fuel miles to get to where they're going, but it's the taste you grow them for. And of course, you can grow exactly what you like to eat. That's the whole point, and oh boy, do I like to eat these. There are endless seeds to buy in the shops to help fill your garden with bountiful harvests of delicious fruit and veg. But nothing beats using your own saved seed from a previous crop. Beans feature very high on our list of favourite veg. And last year, we grew this lovely bean. I've grown it a few times. It's Meraviglia di Venice. It's a yellow podded bean. And here they are. They've overwintered brilliantly. They're completely dry now. I've just kept them in a cool, dry place right the way through the winter. Here's a nice fat one. Just go right into here. From each of these little beans, an enormous plant will grow. Grow to about 8 or 9 feet, 3 metres or so tall. I've just got a series of little pots here. Just push it down, firm the top of this in. Today, some of the garden's more established residents need my help too. This is the time to get them into shape, ready for a show-stopping performance in the summer and autumn. Well, that's what you call a tangle, isn't it? Just look at this. This is my Clematis Huldine. It's utterly beautiful, belongs to the Viticella group, and it has lived together with its host, this crabapple tree, for decades. But if I want to ensure these beautiful starry white flowers going on from late summer right the way into the autumn, it needs a very, very good pruning. Sometimes people get really bothered about how to prune clematis. Well, this is the most straightforward of the lot, because all you do early in the year is get your secateurs out and reduce all its shoots down to about that, to a couple of buds up the stem, chop off the old wood just above that, because that will invigorate the whole plant. New growth will shoot out, and it really does climb at a rate of knots, and it flowers on new wood, so you can't go wrong really. So I want to get right in here, and some of these old stems you can't even see the buds, but you can feel them with your fingers. You can tell just where they are. It seems so drastic, but it's got to be done. So I'll trim every one I can see down to about a foot or so, and then I can go in and reduce the thinner shoots, so I'm left with a few strong ones, which will ensure that my flowers are bigger, better, and that the whole thing can climb really vigorously. This tangled web of branches is reaching right to the top of the tree, so I'm definitely going to need a ladder to finish the job, and a helper in the form of my lovely Neil. Are you all right, Neil? Have you got me? You're not on your phone, are you? So I'm just pulling all this tangle of branches out now. Make sure you've got someone holding your ladder, someone reliable. You know you're getting there when eventually you can actually see the silhouette of the crabapple free of this great tangle of clematis. I almost feel as though the tree can just go, oh, breathe. Are you all right down there, Neil? Haven't gone to sleep, have you? Coming down. Astonishing, isn't it, that a climber can be so vigorous? Elsewhere in the garden, there are some shrub roses that also need my attention. As you come down from the brick garden through this big box hedge, you come to Annie's garden. Annie's my eldest daughter. Well, Annie's hugely fond of rich colours. She loves purples and magentas. And to that end, I've planted right through this bed one particular rose. It's called Rose of William Lobb. It's a moss rose, which means that its buds are covered in this substance that looks just like moss, but when you rub it, you get this gorgeous fragrance. It also has huge scented magenta flowers. What all roses need is a bit of judicious pruning, so I want to start off by taking out anything that's old, dead, diseased. And then I just want to work on the shape a little bit. What you're after is something that's quite open in the middle, because that means lots of air and light get into the shrub. With this particular rose, I've got a sort of unevenness. There are these short stubby bits, but then there are a few gangly bits at the top. So I'm going to make sure that I cut above a bud. And the reason you cut just above a bud with a sloping cut that's going away from the bud is that makes the rain run off the back of it. Because if you leave a stubby bit, it's quite liable to rot. Make sure your secateurs are sharp. When you look at this, it's a little bit congested in the centre. Can you see how these branches are crossing one way and another? And I think what I want to do is take this one out. So I'm going to take it right down to the base with my squeaky loppers. And then I want to do the same thing again. All these dead, diseased bits everywhere. Anything that's facing inwards. And every so often just stand back, just like if you're doing a painting, you need to see where you've got to and what needs doing next. It'll look so much better, I hope, after this pruning, and we should see it flowering in June, July. We'll come and have another look at it in the summer and see if it's all worked out. Next, I'll be refreshing a space in the garden that has a very special significance. I love all sorts of daffodils, particularly the smaller ones, but I think this has to be my favourite. It's Narcissus Pseudo-Narcissus W.P. Milner. It's incredibly beautiful, in fact it's exquisite, and apart from its very, very dainty shape, I think that the factor that really endears me to it is this colour. Starts off with lemon buds, opens to real pale lemony flowers, and gradually the colour fades so it's almost creamy white. And here on this bank it's in its perfect sort of setting. It's a wonderful daffodil to grow in a more natural setting because it's so closely related to those found in the wild. And that's exactly what I'm going to do as part of a project in a very special area. It's called Jeannie's Garden, after my mum. And there are all sorts of memories in my garden. We've been here a long, long time. But my mum was hugely fond of this garden. And I made her a little seat because when she'd been weeding, because I always kept her hard at it, she'd come up here, she'd have a sit down and just have a look across the garden. And this part of the garden is devoted to her. But it had become terribly neglected. There were no special plants here anymore, and I really think that she deserves something much better than that. And this is an opportunity to plant all sorts of things that she would absolutely love and to really maintain her memory. This is the shady side of the garden. Now it's in sunshine, but later on it's going to be in quite dense shade, this whole area. And that means that the sort of plants that I want to concentrate on, and also because she absolutely loved them, are all those spring flowering Cinderellas, the plants that do their thing at this time of the year and then disappear gently over the summer months. So there's already a little bit of W.P. Milner in here. Hello, morning. But I've got a whole load more here. But one thing I would love to add is this trillium. These are the trilliums that I grew from seed. And Jeannie absolutely loved them, no wonder. Look at that marbling. And the petals are just like satin in the spring sunshine. I think these will look really good with that pale lemon too. Now, these trilliums are going to come up year after year. They're young plants at the moment, but eventually they're going to make great big clumps and they'll be here indefinitely, I'm sure long after I've gone. Here we go. It's such a lovely, lovely feeling when you've grown something from seed, especially when it's taken years and years and years, and then you finally get to plant it out, because that's the point of sowing any sort of seed, doing any kind of propagation. It's so that you can use those plants in the garden. That's what it's all about. I might have one there. No, I won't. I'll have one right up here. Woohoo! And I've got even more exciting plants to put in Jeannie's bed. This is a begonia. We used to call it elephant's ears because sometimes the leaves are really huge. This one is overture, which has particularly dark crimson leaves in the winter. They're so versatile and they'll even grow in really, really dry places. And then I thought I'd bring a few of these into Corydalis solida, and it's one called Beth Evans. And these flowers are a strange colour, but I love it. I think it's nice. It reminds me of ice cream or sweeties. Jeannie'd love it. Although I'm creating a bed that will look its most glorious in the spring, these begonias will provide year-round interest. So I think we'll just have this clump here and maybe we'll wander them back into there. And then we'll use the white flowered one further down too. I want these big leaves in here, you know, I want a bit of substance. I can use some little things to sort of dance in between here. But it's all very well laying them all out. This is the important bit, planting them. Normally when you're putting in perennials, you'd really improve the soil a bit with lots of organic stuff, your own compost where possible. But begonias are a bit of an exception. They're quite sort of fibrous rooted. They'll spread themselves out and they really do thrive on poor soil. I think it also makes the winter colour brighter if they're not growing in too rich conditions. I'll tell you what, when you're doing something like this, you've got to be a bit of a ballerina. Can't really see me in a tutu though, can you? I've got a preliminary planting done. Of course, it's not the end of this bed at all. Nothing in gardening ever has an end. I shall keep adding to it and we'll come back and have a look how it's getting on through the different seasons. But right now, I want to give it a thorough drenching. Any kind of planting you want to do that, especially when things are just getting established. But you don't water the plants, you water the soil that the plants are growing in. And then for the first couple of weeks, especially if the weather stays like this, I'm going to come out here and water every day until I feel that things have got established. It's a pleasure anyway, isn't it? So lovely sitting here, just drinking the whole garden in. I feel so happy that we managed to reinvigorate this. You know, it really feels like the start of something rather than a neglected space, and I know that my mum is thrilled to bits. Gardening is just so much more than a collection of plants and how you arrange them. That part of it is wonderful, but it's all about all those memories. It's all here, it's all within this garden. And I'm so thrilled to be sharing mine with you, and I hope you'll join us again next week when we'll see how far spring has progressed. Next time, I'll be sowing a meadow with a difference in a tired corner of my garden, as well as showing you how to get the best results with leeks and artichokes.